The shuttle's ramp hissed open, releasing a thin wisp of pressurized air that smelled faintly of ozone and burnt metal. Private Elias squinted against the twin suns, trying to make sense of the landscape that stretched before him. Jagged crystalline spires jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, and the air shimmered with a faint, golden haze. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the low hum of energy currents, and for reasons he didn't yet understand, his stomach performed a nervous somersault. Lieutenant Morneau had insisted he was prepared for first contact. Elias was not convinced. He had been trained for combat, survival, and diplomacy in the human sense, but diplomacy with beings who had never encountered males before. That was a new syllabus entirely. He adjusted his utility belt, which already felt far too tight, and stepped cautiously onto the phosphorescent soil. Each footfall left a faint blue glow, as though the planet itself were tracking their progress. He had barely taken 3 steps when a rustle to his right caused him to spin around, heart hammering, only to find nothing. Then it happened again, but this time a group of figures emerged from behind the crystalline trees. They moved with a grace that made the soldiers' trained instincts feel clumsy. They were humanoid but unlike anything Elias had ever imagined. Long, slender ears extended from their heads like delicate antennas, and their skin shimmered with a soft silver-blue luminescence. Their eyes were wide, curious, and he swore amused. Greetings," Elias offered, waving awkwardly. One girl tilted her head, mimicking the gesture with a precision that made him second-guess his own movements. Another reached out to touch the sleeve of his uniform, her fingers brushing against the fabric. Elias jerked back, half in alarm, half in a panic he couldn't quite articulate. The others giggled, a sound like wind chimes over water, before approaching in a loose circle around him. He realized with a jolt of understanding that they had never seen a male before. Their fascination wasn't hostile. It was chaotic, sincere, and entirely unfiltered. Private Elias, remember, they might not understand personal boundaries. A voice crackled in his ear. He glanced at the comm, Morneau's voice tinged with equal parts warning and barely contained amusement. Elias swallowed and nodded, though he doubted the girls would be impressed by his subtle human gestures. One of them, the tallest and apparently the boldest, reached for his helmet. Elias instinctively held it back, but she laughed, a trill that seemed to vibrate through the air, and tugged it from him. Another girl leaned forward, sniffing the air around his shoulder pads as if examining a new species of plant. Elias tried to explain, gesturing to himself. I am human." The girls repeated the words slowly, their pronunciation strange but delightful. Then they burst into giggles again, and before he knew it, they were tugging at the straps of his uniform, inspecting the buttons and folds with meticulous curiosity. Elias stumbled backward, one boot catching a crystal root, and landed on his rear with a soft thud. One girl extended a hand, but instead of helping him up, she placed a glowing vine across his chest and stepped back. Elias blinked. "That's decorative, right?" he muttered to himself, trying not to sound as panicked as he felt. The girls nodded solemnly, apparently very serious about their new human decoration. One even attempted to replicate it, draping her own shimmering garment over a smaller crystal, a kind of mirror in their culture that seemed to elicit endless fascination. The humor of the situation only partially distracted him from the absurdity of being inspected like a walking exhibit. Another girl, with mischief sparkling in her eyes, tugged at his jacket, revealing his undershirt, which promptly got snagged on a jagged crystal. Elias yelped, spinning in place to free himself, and accidentally sent his helmet flying into a shallow, glowing pond. The girls shrieked, not in fear, but in delight, splashing around the pond and waving their hands over the water to make strange ripples. Elias crouched, trying to retrieve his helmet without wetting his uniform further, only to discover that another girl had already claimed it, balancing it atop her head as though it were a crown. That's mine," he said, reaching for it. The girl tilted her head and mimicked his words, repeating "mine" with exaggerated solemnity, then bolted off, giggling, helmet in tow. Elias groaned and chased after her, weaving through the crystalline formations, tripping occasionally on phosphorescent roots and narrowly avoiding collision with another soldier who had silently appeared behind him. The girls' laughter followed him, echoing across the alien landscape, blending with the soft hum of energy currents to create a bizarre symphony that was part chaos, part charm. By the time Elias finally cornered the girl, panting and red-faced, the others had joined in, tugging at his sleeves, testing his gloves, and examining his boots as though each item were a magical artifact. One girl, more methodical than the others, attempted to balance on his shoulders to get a better look at his head, eliciting gasps of horror from nearby soldiers and laughter from everyone else. Elias grunted under the weight, trying to negotiate terms of engagement through panting words and frantic gestures, realizing that diplomacy on this planet required more flexibility than a human body could reasonably offer. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Elias slumped against a crystalline spire, his uniform in disarray, helmet still precariously perched atop the bold girl's head. The girls gathered around, examining him as if he were both a puzzle and a toy, their eyes bright with curiosity and mischief. He blinked, caught between exasperation and awe. Somewhere deep in the chaos, he found a flicker of humor in the absurdity of it all, a shared understanding, even across species, that life could be unpredictable, awkward, and strangely delightful. And in that moment, standing on a world that defied imagination, Elias realized that survival here would require patience, humor, and a willingness to embrace the chaos these alien girls brought into his very human world. The chapter ended not with victory or resolution, but with the simple, ridiculous truth. On this planet, clothing was negotiable, dignity was optional, and curiosity had 1,000 long ears that twitched at every move. Elias woke to a chorus of soft, tinkling laughter echoing through the crystalline halls of the alien settlement. He had been allowed to sit upright this time, but his uniform remained a chaotic collage of torn fabric, glowing stains from phosphorescent soil, and oddly attached vines that the girls seemed to regard as decorative enhancements. One of them, the tallest with those long, expressive ears, hovered near him with a curious tilt of her head, as if analyzing whether his eyebrows moved in a logical pattern. Elias rubbed his face and tried a weak smile, already anticipating that this day would not resemble any training exercise the human army had ever prepared him for. "Good morning," he said cautiously, knowing the girls might mimic the words in some unpredictable fashion. The words came back at him almost immediately, stretched into musical tones that somehow conveyed amusement, confusion, and inquiry all at once. One of the smaller girls pointed at his chest and then at him, repeating his name in a way that sounded like a question, the syllables rolling around like tiny bouncing spheres. Elias chuckled, realizing that language on this planet was less about rules and more about experimentation. His initial attempts at establishing boundaries were met with good-natured resistance. One girl, the mischievous one, grabbed his sleeve and tugged him toward a long corridor made of transparent crystal panels. He stumbled, muttering under his breath, as the others followed, their long ears swaying like antennae tuned to the frequency of his every movement. The corridor shimmered as light bent through it, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that bounced off the girl's luminous skin. Elias felt like a walking prism, every movement amplified, and yet, somehow, he found himself laughing along with them. The absurdity was inescapable. A human male navigating social etiquette with beings whose concept of personal space was literally non-existent. They led him to a central chamber where the air pulsed with faint electrical currents, wires snaking along the walls like living vines. The girls circled him, hands reaching out to inspect, poke, and prod. Elias held his arms up in surrender, but one girl had already perched on his shoulder, balancing with uncanny agility. He tried to carefully remove her, but she clutched at his collar with surprising strength, declaring something in her lilting language that he assumed was a proclamation of ownership, or perhaps just delight. A small, glowing drone hovered nearby, capturing the scene from multiple angles. Elias groaned. Not only was he an unwilling participant in an alien cultural ritual, but it seemed documentation was required for posterity. One of the girls, the most methodical of the group, produced a device that resembled a cross between a teapot and a holographic projector. She pressed a button, and a holographic projection of Elias appeared, his movements delayed and slightly exaggerated. The girls erupted in laughter, pointing at the projection's awkward spins and flailing limbs. Elias pinched the bridge of his nose, realizing he had become both entertainer and experiment. Yet amidst the chaos, he noticed subtle moments of understanding. When he raised a hand slowly and placed it over his heart, one girl mirrored the gesture, tilting her head and holding the position with solemn curiosity. For a fleeting moment, he sensed a bridge forming between human and alien perception, a shared language of gesture, humor, and fascination. During a pause in the hijinks, Elias attempted to introduce a concept familiar to him: the idea of clothing as both functional and symbolic. He gestured to his uniform, then to the girl's flowing garments, which shimmered and changed color depending on movement. They observed him with wide, sparkling eyes, occasionally touching the fabric and giggling at the sensation of his armor against their fingers. One of them, with a playful smirk, tried to wear his gloves, which were comically oversized. She staggered backward, waving her long ears for balance, eliciting a mixture of laughter and mock horror from Elias. The other girls joined in, forming an impromptu parade, dragging pieces of his uniform through the chamber, as though each item had suddenly acquired its own personality. Elias sighed, realizing resistance was futile. Humor, it seemed, was both survival and diplomacy here. He decided to play along, transforming his frantic attempts at self-preservation into exaggerated gestures and mock indignation. The girls responded with glee, following his antics like devoted audience members at a theater performance. One, braver than the others, produced a small, iridescent brush and began painting streaks across his armor, adding yet another layer of chaotic decoration. Elias flinched and then chuckled, admitting silently that this was, somehow, preferable to a physical confrontation. As the day progressed, the interactions grew more intricate. Elias began teaching them simple human expressions and gestures, carefully demonstrating smiles, waves, and bows. The girls interpreted these in their own way, creating a hybrid language of movement and sound that felt entirely organic. At one point, a girl mimicked his salute but added an elaborate spin, landing in a crouch and wiggling her long ears dramatically. Elias laughed so hard he nearly fell backward, the absurdity of his situation both humbling and enchanting. For the first time, he recognized that these aliens, despite, or perhaps because of, their innocence, possessed a wisdom and curiosity that humans often lacked. Toward the end of their interactions, Elias found himself seated on a crystalline bench, surrounded by the girls, each engaged in examining different parts of his attire or replicating his movements. He was half exhausted, half amused, and entirely captivated. Their laughter echoed through the settlement, bouncing off crystal walls and mixing with the soft hum of alien energy fields. He realized that while he had arrived expecting tension, threat, or perhaps danger, what he encountered was a living, breathing comedy of errors. Their innocence combined with curiosity had turned a soldier's routine mission into a chaotic ballet of humor, learning, and unexpected connection. The chapter closed with Elias leaning back, letting the girls continue their playful inspections, and muttering to himself, "Well, if diplomacy is always this chaotic, I might just survive." Somewhere nearby, a drone buzzed and captured the scene, a testament to the day humanity and alien innocence had collided in the most absurd, delightful way imaginable. And for Elias, surrounded by long ears, laughter, and a luminous, unpredictable world. He realized that the first steps into true interstellar understanding required nothing more than patience, humor, and the willingness to be completely ridiculous. The morning light filtered through the crystalline spires, refracting into 1,000 tiny rainbows across the central hall. Elias stood at the threshold, fully clothed this time, though his uniform bore streaks of glowing paint and a few tangled vines from yesterday's escapades. The girls had gathered around him, their long ears twitching with excitement and curiosity, and Elias realized that what had begun as chaotic inspection had transformed into something remarkably structured, a ritual of interaction that balanced humor, learning, and trust. One of the girls, the boldest, stepped forward, holding his helmet like a crown, and with a grin that mirrored his own awkward amusement, she placed it on his head once again, though this time more ceremoniously, as if acknowledging him as a participant rather than a curiosity. The soldiers, stationed discreetly nearby, exchanged glances. The situation had moved beyond chaos into something resembling harmony, though the human definition of harmony still involved a fair amount of alien glitter and unintentional slapstick. Lieutenant Morno whispered over the comm, "Private Elias, I have to admit this is more entertaining than any training exercise we've run." Elias smirked beneath the helmet, grateful that at least someone shared his appreciation for absurdity. The girls were eager for more interaction, and Elias, now acclimated to their peculiar rhythm, decided to guide the day with deliberate mischief. He held out his hands and gestured to mimic a human dance, exaggerating every movement to ridiculous extremes. The girls mirrored him, spinning and leaping with their long ears flopping dramatically, their laughter blending with the soft hum of the crystalline structures. One girl attempted to lift his leg mid-step, causing him to stumble and nearly collide with a crystal pillar, but he caught himself, bowing with mock solemnity. Their giggles escalated into shrieks of delight, and for the first time, Elias felt a sense of partnership, human and alien, teaching each other about humor, movement, and shared experience. Soon, the girls shifted focus to their own devices, literally. One activated a small machine that projected holographic constellations across the hall, each star corresponding to a part of the galaxy known to their people. Elias crouched to study it, fascinated, and realized that the girls had not only mastered spatial technology, but also used it as a storytelling tool. Their gestures painted histories, myths, and speculative tales of worlds far beyond human reach. He attempted to replicate one, adding exaggerated hand movements that made the holographic stars wobble humorously, causing peals of laughter from both the girls and nearby soldiers. In that moment, he felt the thrill of true connection, discovery without hierarchy, instruction without arrogance, and humor without pretense. The playful chaos culminated in a ceremonial feast. The girls presented dishes that shimmered and shifted colors with every movement, aromas that triggered memory-like sensations in Elia's mind, and textures that defied conventional expectation. One plate released a harmless plasma spark when touched, sending Elias leaping back in mock horror, only to have the girls imitate his flailing arms in perfect exaggeration. Soldiers tried to maintain composure, but the hall quickly devolved into controlled mayhem. Yet, amidst the absurdity, Elias sensed the deeper rhythm. The girls' rituals, playful though they appeared, were exercises in trust, communication, and the creation of shared experience. By mid-feast, Elias had become a performer, a teacher, and a student simultaneously. He had learned to anticipate the girls' gestures, interpret their mimicry, and even incorporate their methods into his own behavior. He realized that his initial anxiety, his fear of being examined and misunderstood, had shifted into a profound respect for their perspective. Humor had become his bridge, curiosity their shared currency, and the chaos the framework of understanding. As the ceremony drew to a close, Elias knelt among them, allowing a girl to drape another glowing vine across his shoulders. She tilted her head, long ears swaying, as if asking a silent question about the nature of humans and their rituals. He chuckled and mirrored her gesture, placing a hand over his heart, demonstrating acknowledgement, appreciation, and friendship. The girls responded in unison, a chorus of laughter, soft humming, and synchronized twitches of ears that felt, in a strange way, like applause. The soldiers gradually approached, prepared to conclude the visit, but the girls stepped back, respecting the balance that had been established. Elias realized that the experience had changed him. He had entered the alien world expecting disorder, but found a system of understanding within the chaos. He had feared embarrassment and invasion, yet discovered joy and kinship. In the unlikeliest of classrooms, he had learned the universality of curiosity, the power of laughter, and the delicate art of bridging worlds through shared experience rather than domination or fear. Finally, as the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, painting the crystalline city in a kaleidoscope of light, Elias stood to leave.